Hello, welcome to this second online masterclass of the project Antigone's Pride Performing Society, project promoted by Astragali Teatro in partnership with the University of Salento, Augmented and Virtual Reality Lab, Theatro Tsi Zakynthos from Greece, Grotowski Institute from Poland, and Foundation of Dance Alicia Alonso of Madrid University, Juan Carlos from Spain, a project supported by the Creative Europe program. So this second masterclass is with the very important guest, Professor Mary Yossi from National and Capodistrian University of Athens, Emeritus Professor of Classics. And this meeting with her that has been possible thanks to Theatro Tsi Zakynthos, thanks to Giovanna Capodistria and Kostas Kapodistrias, is very important for the project as Professor Yossi has been working on Maria Zambrano, and in particular, she's working on the translation in Greek of the Tomb of Antigone of Maria Zambrano, a text which is a reference for the creative artistic work that we've been carrying out in this project. The work in progress of the performance that we had the opportunity to play in Spain, in a nature reserve, and in Poland, in a nature park near the Odra River, and that we will perform in its third stage of creation in Lecce, in another nature reserve of Lecesine. This performance, this work in progress, is focusing mainly on the work of Maria Zambrano, the Tomb of Antigone. So not only on the classical tragedy of Sophocles, and also on the contemporary text of Bertolt Brecht, but mainly on Maria Zambrano, the Tomb of Antigone. So we are very much pleased to know more about Zambrano and her important, even kind of autobiographical relationship with Antigone, thanks to the work of Maria Yossi. I would like to give the floor to Giovanna Capodistrias to introduce our esteemed speaker. Thank you, Professor Yossi, for accepting this invitation, and thank you very much also, Giovanna, for introducing Professor Yossi.
Thank you so much, Roberta, and everyone. We are very happy that we can have this chance today to speak with Professor Mary Yossi about her extreme work. I would like just to read some a small part of her very large and important resume, because I don't have the time to explain all her work that she has done all these years. And so she's a Professor Emeritus of Classics in the School of Philosophy on the University of Athens, National and Capodistrian University of Athens. She's born in Athens, and she studied law at the National and Capodistrian University of Athens, and classics at the University of Toronto in Canada. As a professor of ancient Greek literature at the National and Capodistrian University of Athens, she taught Greek tragedy, Plato and Aristotle's poetics, Greek lyric poetry, and ancient Greek religion and mythology. She has also taught for several years ancient Greek literature as an affiliated professor at the Hellenic Open University. She is the author of numerous essays and publications, and she is very active as a translator. Many of her translators have been staged at the Epidavros Festival. She also co-edited with Maria Laina Anna Chrysogelou Katsi the thematic anthology of modern Greek tales in 5 volumes. Her poems have been translated into English, French, Italian, and Spanish. She has lectures and seminarated at the Universities of Florida, South Florida, St. Joseph, Philadelphia, State University of New York, Hunter College, Boston University, and Harvard University. In September 2016, she presented at the international conference Ecos y Resplendores Helenos en la Literatura Hispana from 16th to 21st century, that was held in Athens, a selection of poems by Maria, and she's also currently working on with Christos Sioirikis to the translation of La Tomba de Antigone by Maria Zambrano. So thank you so much, Professor Yossi, that accepted this invitation, and I'm very pleased to give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanna and dear Roberta. It's the second time we've met here and everyone here. And I also want to thank Fabio Toledi for inviting me to give this lecture. I dare not say it a lecture finished, well and polished, but some ideas on La Tomba de Antigone by Maria Zambrano. That I've been working with Christos Sioirikis for some years now on the translation of this difficult and unique text. And we are glad to announce that soon it will appear, it will be published early in the 24th by the Editions Logia here in Athens. I'm grateful to you, Giovanna, who insisted that I could do it, could participate in your support during my attacks of anxiety, because although I have spent 40 years lecturing, I'm always all the more anxious every time I have to speak about what I'm thinking. And what I'm thinking, it's usually a mess that is coming to form something solid so we can talk about it afterwards. So today's lecture has a very dubious title, Maria Zambrano at Colonus. And let's start immediately, because I'm better when I read a few things and then divert and do my own things with your help, of course. Blind old Oedipus, exiled from Thebes, reaches Athens, led by his daughter Antigone. It is there that, according to Apollo's oracle, is bound to meet his miraculous end at the grove of Eumenides, the Dari goddesses, or Semnetheae, on Ippios Kolonos, Colonus dedicated to Poseidon, lord of the horses. The site is sacred, and Antigone and her father are instructed by the chorus of Attica's elders to step out of it and take refuge at the area before it, where Oedipus rests on a rock. It is there that all the dramatis personae of the play, Theseus, Ismene, Creon, and Polynices, come to meet them. In Sophocles' last surviving play, Oedipus at Colonus, produced posthumously in 401 BC, the myth is saved. Everything is in its place. The scenery confirms the oracle, which predicted Oedipus' end. Dramatic space is then given to dramatic time. Blindness, oracular discourse, terrible and pitiable events foreshadowed, Creon and Polynices, some external agents of reversal to intensify the emotions, but also to guarantee the solid and complex structure of the plot, as for example, the abduction of Antigone and Ismene, etc., plus Theseus in its usual role of mediator, and the political bearings of his persona for the original audience, are all well tuned. Only Antigone stands out, not misplaced, but mislocated, or several times dislocated. Zambrano watches her closely. She already recognizes in this last Sophoclean representation of Antigone's persona the possibility of transcending the limits of her prescribed by the Theban legend ethos or character, and into the realm of an alarming blurring of the dichotomy being not being, bordering the other. An important number of previous dramatic treatment of the myth by all three major tragedians were at Zambrano's disposal. Aeschylus's Seven Against Thebes, Sophocles' Antigone and Oedipus Tyrannus, Euripides' Phoenician Women. Why should we, reading Zambrano's Antigone's Tomb, shift the emphasis from the Sophoclean namesake drama or even the model tragedy of Oedipus the King to the late broken Oedipus at Colonus? It is because its dramatic place, Colonus, situated at the limits between the secular and the sacred, between life and death, appears as another waiting room for death, as Antigone's Tomb in Zambrano's unique dramatic work. Also because the liminality of place marks the transformation of broken Oedipus, the scapegoat king, into a potent protective Chthonian power. But mainly because it represents a place of exile, or more properly, of exile as a place, a site non-site, a transito, a passage, which informs a person's identity, or in this case, his or her persona. Significantly, Zambrano's dramatic work is not Antigone, but Antigone's tomb, as already Camacho Rojo, in an excellent article, has noted. The Sophoclean Oedipus, who enters the grove of the Eumenides, reappears in Zambrano, having regained his sight, but ignorant of who he really is, asking not only to be guided by Antigone, but to be reborn through her, to be led to a place only she can conduct him. Irene Morallo underlines the irony in Antigone's words addressing her father. Ah, are you a god or just a human? Are you man? Reminding us of Oedipus's reply to the riddle of the Sphinx, with a remark that after scene 3, entitled The Dream of the Sister, there is a notable change of tone, dal onirico a quello ironico. The father figure he represents is much debated in Antigone's Tomb, not only in the Oedipus scene, but also in the shadow of the mother, as well as in Antigone's last monologue. The father figure is dissociated from the king figure in an otherwise entangling discussion of gender, kinship, and power. While in the last Sophoclean play, Oedipus is the protagonist and the homo sacer par excellence, with Antigone still a person persona in the making, supporting the old blind beggar king and leading his way, in Zambrano, Antigone as the protagonist is at first a palimpsest of voices of the figures, alive, dead, or symbolic, that come to visit her in her tomb. The protagonists, wrote Zambrano in El hombre y lo destino, before being a person, is a bloodline. This bloodline is humbly and aptly exposed in most of the 12 parts of Antigone's tomb. Now I come to the role of the dramatic place in constructing the dramatis persona. The grove of Colonus, wherever it was situated, was considered one of the entrances to the underworld. However, Sophocles depicts his birthplace as an earthly paradise. But in his Oedipus at Colonus, as Patricia Easterling observes in her 2004 lecture on Sophocles and the Mysteries, Colonus is an imaginary landscape, an imaginary location, a region of the mind. Given its close connection to the underworld and to some versions of the Demeter myth, to the site from which Pluto or Hades abducted Persephone, we can see how it is connected to Antigone's tomb as Gianna Antigone is explicitly presented in Zambrano's work as a maiden, a virgin as Cori. Thus, Oedipus' a Colonus dramatic plays paves the way to Antigone's tomb with two notable differences. The protagonist is now Antigone herself, and the place is not the open space before the grove cave of the Eumenides, but a tomb cave with just an opening, a door from which people enter or through which they depart, pointing to the cave allegory of Plato. Zambrano's exact description in her manuscript notes included now in the 2012 edition by Virginia Trueba Mira is mainly based in Sophocles' Antigone, where we hear in lines 1024-5 of the Lithostroton choris Nymphion Aidou Kilon, the maiden's stony-bedded bridal chamber, the caverned mansion of Hades' bride. And again, a few lines down, Armon homatos lithospodi dindes pros avtos tomion, entering through the opening where the stones of the mound have been torn away up to the cell's very mouth. This tomb is again a site non-site, as pointed out by Judith Butler and Andrew Bush, of an Antigone that now has a voice that demands to be heard, a voice that in Sophoclean Oedipus at Colonus was still a whisper, uttered unconvincingly by a girl subject to the authority of her father or Creons, a voice that in the Sophoclean Antigone is clearly heard but violently silenced by confinement. The encounter of Antigone with Polynices in Oedipus at Colonus prefigures in a way Antigone's dialogue with both her brothers in Zambrano's work. We know that Antigone never confronts Eteocles in the surviving Sophoclean Theban plays. Twice in Oedipus at Colonus, Antigone is called to perform the ritual bathing of the dead, one of Oedipus before his miraculous disappearance into the grove. And I remind you that Antigone calls in Sophoclean Antigone both her mother and father kekephthotes and Aidou, hidden in Hades. And again, one of Polynices. Zambrano insists on this ritual performance central to Sophocles' Antigone, attributing to her Antigone the term lavandora, as she will later attribute her the term tejedora, weaver. This scene in Oedipus at Colonus, the encounter between Polynices and Antigone, is characterized by its pathos. Polynices leaves the stage convinced that his doom is inevitable because of Oedipus's inexorable curse. The curse itself, central to all Theban tragedies, as much as Apollo's oracles, are not given much emphasis in Zambrano's work, where incest, the overstepping of kinship bonds, is highlighted. Turning now to Antigone's tomb, we note that in the vocabulary of dramatic plays, a major role is played by terra, earth, and the common body metaphor, its entrails, entrañas, along with stones and the primordial water of a stream or a spring, furnish Zambrano's work with vividness and clarity, where the sensory is imbued with emotions and sometimes with the awe of the sacred. The same holds true for other significant loci in Antigone's tomb: home, homeland, patria, and exile. Through them, Gianna Antigone draws her trajectory, and it is here that Zambrano meets her and projects on her circumstances of her own. I took the term circumstances from Ortega y Gasset's definition of the self, yo soy yo y mis circunstancias. Roberta Johnson, in her 2013 article on Zambrano's solitude, added that Zambrano's ideas on solitude and self-formation, present not only in her essays, but in Antigone's Tube as well, affords us the opportunity to add exile and gender to these circumstances. Now I turn shortly on exile as a site, non-site, and the person-persona dichotomy. In scene 4, with the title Oedipus, we hear Oedipus saying, "Oh, Antigone, do I have to tell you where you are when it is so clear? This is all so clear. You are in the place where one is born completely. That is why we all come to you. Help me, daughter Antigone. Don't let me wander in forgetfulness. Help me now that I begin to know. Help me, daughter, to be born." In the same scene, Oedipus calls Antigone his logos, rathon, or reason, born out of his thinking or mind, pensiamento. Antigone herself asserts in scene 2, La Noche, "Now I'm going to be born here." This inner place, the tomb, the entrails of earth, is still the ambivalent site, non-site between life and death, that is, of being, not being, of a person striving to come to light, be reborn, and I quote from Zambrano, liberated from the dark labyrinth of both its family and history. And according to Johnson again, this enables her to make a distinction between person, persona in Spanish, always more than an individual, and persona or personaje in Spanish, or enmascarado as a person who allows him or herself to be deformed by history. In an inescapable, it seems, biographical note, Johnson remarks, "Zambrano's itinerary from Spain to Cuba to Paris, back to Cuba, and finally to Rome and Switzerland mirrors her philosophical journey from civic self to gender self, forged in solitude and society, and finally to a universal notion of the self as a person." As you understand, a vast area for discussion opens here with the necessary references to the philosophical dialogue of Zambrano with Hegel on Hölderlin, on Sophocles' Antigone, as well with her contemporary thinkers such as Heidegger, Benjamin, Ortega y Gasset, Hannah Arendt, especially The Human Condition and We the Refugees, René Girard, especially The Expiatory Victim, Violence and the Sacred, or Giorgio Agamben, Homo Sacer, The Bare Life, etc. How do we understand this strange place of being between life and death, of speaking precisely from this vacillating point, asks Judith Butler. Zambrano names this speaking from ruins a delirium. And according to Bush, her Antigone represents not only the site, non-site of an exiled, as she had herself been for almost 45 years, but the place between poetry and philosophy, a place then where the unspeakable speaks. From the perspective of philosophy, Bush notes, the coming into being of consciousness, which is to say, the coming into human being, is a victory that brings to an end the melancholic losses of poetry. But since philosophy speaks in the language of being, what it cannot say is the very process of coming. It must turn, as Zambrano turns, to poetry to relate that prehistory. Intermediate notes. Actin, pratin, and praxis, and suffering, passion or passion. Sacrifice versus suicide. I'm going to read a passage from Zambrano's prologue to the Antigone's tomb, adding the relevant terms from Aristotle's Poetics as I understand or misunderstand it. Quotation. The protagonist is already an actor. I read Platon. Through the action, praxis, he carries out with true passion, suffering, as are all that surround him, except for the seer and the chorus that know and prefer a moral and even at times moralizing judgment, which the protagonist, possessed by his passion, suffering, cannot take into account. The moral is on another plane that does not have anything to do with him. The moral, close to reason, comes later and only after he has actively exhausted his pain. We could say that the moral is an inheritance that the protagonist's suffering leaves, thanks precisely to this hubris for which they reproach him or her. Because without it, without the corresponding delirium, the extraordinary actions, the spudea, among gods and men, between destiny and the nation liberty, would not be fulfilled. In Sophocles' Oedipus at Colonus, Oedipus, addressing the chorus, exclaims, "Are you drive me again away, afraid of my name or of my acts, erga? Since my acts, at least, have been in suffering, peponthota, rather than doing, the drakota, if I must mention the tale of my mother and my father." It could be maintained that in Zambrano's Antigone's tomb, the whole praxis is a passion, something that one has experienced or suffered. Antigone's rebellious act to bury her brother Polynices against Creon's prohibition, an act of piety for her, led inevitably to her confinement and ultimately to her death. Zambrano, in the prologue of Antigone's tomb, rejects the Sophoclean treatment of myth, which presents Antigone's suicide and allows her the time to transcend her prolonged lament and move towards her rebirth in herself. In her prologue, this is a path through sacrifice. The innocent victim is in this case totally pure, and as Zambrano states in El hombre lo divino, quote, "The innocent pays open the road to liberty," that already is imagined as a dawn. In Antigone's tomb, Zambrano invokes dawn, aurora, the leading symbol in her philosophical or spiritual universe, the dawn of consciousness, to light her passage through fear and uncertainty to love, amor, and compassion, piedad. Here Antigone weaves past, present, and future, as the Muses in his Theogony, who gave him the gift of poetry, since she is a weaver going to and fro all her life, as the nurse Anne asserts, crossing always the line that marks limits and boundaries, always between life and death, as Zambrano herself, a weaver of words, not a weaver of arguments, as the harpy or spider, between poetry and philosophy. Now I have to make a digression, and I hope it's not too confusing. This digression has to do with la piedad compassion? Well, as a motto, I have something in Italian, and please forgive my Italian. It's from Eri De Luca, I pesci non chiudono gli occhi. So adesso che una giustizia nuova attenda al caso singolo e che inveda su misura la sentenza, muove della misericordia per l'offeso, perciò riesce a essere spietata. La misericordia è implacabile e non si fa reprimere. È all'inizio essenziale nella formazione di un carattere rivoluzionario. The second quotation is from Delirio de Antigone, a text that preceded the Tomb of Antigone, written by Maria Zambrano in 1948, and specifically from Delirio Primo. These are words that Zambrano repeated in La Tomba de Antigone. Born for love, pity has devoured me. And what am I to do with these wailing entrails that I feel for the first time when it is no longer time? I have to admit there is no adequate translation of the term piedad as used by Maria Zambrano, not one available for its specific use in Antigone's tomb. Christos Iourikis and I know that very well as we were trying to translate the term into Greek. As tempting as it might be, even the rendering pity, perhaps related to Aristotle's eleos, which along with phobos, fear, or terror in Zambrano are the two powerful emotions produced by tragedy, is far from being satisfactory. Compassion comes close, still it may not cover all instances that the word is found in Zambrano, who tried to give a working definition of the term in her essay Para una historia de la piedad, first date, Havana, 1949. Here too, La Poesia appears as the prehistory of history, which, I quote, in order to be complete and truly human, has to come out of those secret places we call entrails, the seat of the emotions, sentimientos, according to Zambrano, who regrets, much like Ignaz Meyerson, as presented by Vernon in his Andromede Politique, the fact that a history of the emotions is still non-existent. Zambrano places La Piedad in the empty, palpitating area of emotions that defy concise definition, in particular in the area of those positive or denoted love or affection. Distinct from love or from Christian love, even from compassion, a passion more generic and diffuse, is acclaimed as the prehistory of all positive emotions, the matrix of the life of emotions. Things more difficult to grasp through their presence, but better felt through their absence, as a loved person, our homeland, our health, etc., and the examples are Zambrano's, resist definition because, quote, to define is to see clearly the limits of something, and in order to do so, you need a distance from it. Among these emotions or feelings, Zambrano places piedad, lamenting its eclipse under the heavy shadow of rationalism. She reaches then a first definition, since compassion and philanthropy are inadequate. Piedad is knowing how to deal with the different, the other, tratar con lo otro. Tolerance, too, is not the right rendering, since tolerance means to keep the other at a distance, even with respect. In order to feel piedad, you must conceive reality and at the same time conceive yourself as a heterogeneous element in it. It is a sense of belonging and dispossession at the same time, since ultimately piedad es sentimiento de la heterogeneidad del ser. Contemporary man, Zambrano concludes, has been converted into a being who only needs to know the visible and tangible things. He needs the vision offered by poetic reason, razón poética, open to the Heraclean coincidentia oppositorum, which Zambrano illustrates in the concluding lines of the harpy in Antigone's tomb, where Antigone appears reluctant to disassociate piedad from amor. Now I come to closing remarks on Antigone's tomb. Despite their title, they are open to discussion. One, the significant absences. Some of them were discussed already in our first meeting, Roberta. The absence of gods, the absence of the presence of seer and the chorus. But I think in the prologue, Zambrano gave some reasons for that. B, the inconclusive endings. And I consider inconclusive the ending of Antigone's tomb because of the two strangers at the end, that they appear at the end. And C, I would dare to make a conclusion based mainly of what I said as a title of this lecture. It's a daring conclusion to drive us back to the title of my presentation. The conception of a person persona as a locus topos allows multivalent metamorphosis of dramatic place into the open space of a passage and hacia, towards, as Zambrano would have it. And if I can make some suggestions as a very serious academic, further readings, Maria Zambrano's Antigone's tomb repeatedly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Yossi, for this extraordinary lecture on this philosophical, poetical, theatrical text, which is quite unique and which is so deep, as you could show us the different layers of this text, which never reaches the answer. It's always like a continuous questioning, continuous changing between the we worked on this also in Poland and in Spain, on the shadow and the light, and like merging always together. But what you said, for example, on La Piedad, which is a feeling so indispensable to feel the other, it's something that it's really like revolutionary message. No, I would not say message, but action that the myth of Antigone can suggest us, and that really deeply concerns also Maria Zambrano as an exiled person, as you said, as a person who lived the exile on her skin, on her flesh. And there are a lot of questions I would like to ask, and I think also the other colleagues who are here. So I don't know, Joanna, if you wanted to say something before I close this session, and I close the live streaming, and we start the talk for the Zoom participants. Please, Giovanna.
Roberta,
for
please,
Costas, of course. Yes, please, Costas.
I want to thank Mrs. Yossi. I think it was a great experience for me to listen all these things. May I do the first question? do you think that it's better to do it me or the last one?
Well, Kostas, now we finished the live streaming, and then for the questions we will be only in the Zoom, okay? So that we will have a talk with the Professor Yossi. Okay, Kostas, I ask you please to make it after. So
I would like also to say thank you so much, Professor Yossi, for this incredible presentation, and from all of us, I believe that we wish good luck with the publication, and if I say it right, of La Tomba di Antigone in Greece, because it's very, very important, and I know very well about your work in Maria Zambrano's poetry and her world that is still, we can say, unknown in our country, but thanks to you, we will have the chance to know her better. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Giovanna.
thank you very much, and definitely it's very important that you can translate in Greek this masterpiece of Maria Zambrano. So thank you again very much for this great inspirational speech, and we stop here this masterclass, the live streaming of this masterclass. We will stay on the Zoom, and I would like to remind you about tomorrow or last masterclass at 5 p.m. with the Vincenzo Cuomo. It will be about inspiration and transduction in an eco-ontological perspective. This will be tomorrow, the last online masterclass of Antigone's Pride Project. Thank you so much to Professor Yossi and to all of you that could follow this masterclass.
Thank you, Roberta.